And hello to everyone this morning. I feel honored that people woke up just to listen to me. I feel special. Thank you for this. In this short time, I'm going to try to just highlight certain things, and then we will engage with them during the question and answer session. I have been a professional counselor now for about 14 years. And then, however, as far as I remember, I think I've been a counselor since day one when I came out of my mother's womb, because when we played as children, I was the one who comes and try and solve people's problems. When we grew up as teenagers, I was the one who would come and want to bring them to sit down, and we talk about things. And I realized that, and my mother, by the way, is a psychiatric nurse, so I remember it around age 15, 16 upwards, I used to take her books and read them, because I was fascinated by the psychological processes of human beings. So I was always fascinated by the dynamics of human behavior and human relationships. So it's the area that I paid attention to. And funny enough is that my first sermon ever, I remember, I was trembling and shaking. It was on relationships. So I realized that I am so drawn to relationships, even in my preaching. If I will put something about relationships in my preaching. So it's something that I really like to do. But I had this one bugging question, which still haunts me till today, is how do people change? How do people change? I knew that people change, and I know that people change, but how? I always wanted to understand, how do people change? How do they make that twist to make a different decisions, and what is the scientific process they go through for them to actually change? What happens to them? Because I realized in my own life, I was having a different way of looking at the world. I used to believe that you cannot succeed in life unless you commit a crime somewhere, to knowing how to wait for the process, wait for things, follow the right procedure, do things with integrity. How did I make this transition? I always wanted to know how does that work? And through observation, through counseling people, through checking myself, checking my clients, asking certain questions, studying material from different people, I realized that there are three things that are involved in someone changing. There are three things that are involved in someone changing. Number one, I think, is in the area of our emotions. When there's a change in emotion, people stand a chance to change. But that does not help us much, because what brings those emotions there in the first place, I think, is the question that we need to ask now. How do these emotions come in now and cause that change? Because we realize that our will is highly influenced by how we think and how we feel. And if the emotions are dominant, people take the direction of the emotions. So in the area of emotions, once we know how to balance these emotions or channel them in the right places, we change. But still, we are not getting the right answer that we are looking for, because how do we get those emotions? Then I realized that the emotions are almost always fueled by the meaning we attach to things. When we attach certain meaning to things, we feel certain emotions. Or example, Tostin did not greet me this morning. It means, the moment I say it means, there will be an emotion that accompanies that meaning. So I realized that it is in the meaning that we spark the emotions. But then still, it does not give us the answer that we are looking for as to how people change. And then I realized that understanding our worldview, because it's in the worldview that we give meaning to things. It's in the worldview that we attach meaning to things, and then it's in the meaning that we produce emotions, and it's the emotions that causes us to move in a particular direction, because emotions are the feelings in the inside of us that motivate us to move in a particular direction. So I realized that this is the process that it takes for people to truly change. And then as I said, that the meaning we attach to things determine how we feel about them, right? Determine how we feel about them. So, and the worldview give us the meaning of things. So in our counseling room, when we do counseling, there's a technique that we use. I'm going to start at the end and go back to the worldview. I want to explain a particular technique that we use to determine what kind of worldview does this client that is in front of us holds, right? And this technique, we call it an emotional regulator. It helps a lot. It's the technique of a hand. We use a hand to get to the kind of worldview this person that we are about to counsel is holding, so that we assist them understand their worldview and bring them to the place of healing, or the process of healing in whatever that they are going through. Ne? So as I'm explaining, let me explain the hand, how it works. The hand works this way. This is a fascinating technique, and I used this hand to do my own therapy one time. I'll tell the story after explaining the hand. The hand works like this. This finger, our thumb, when people ask you, how are you? You say you are fine, right? So you're showing this, it shows the emotion that you are currently feeling, right? So this is an emotion finger. And this finger here, it points, it is the point of focus. Which thoughts are you focusing on? It focuses on the thoughts, right? What thought is associated with the feeling that you have, right? And then we go to this place. This finger here is the finger of meaning. What does it mean for you when that thought happens? When you say, I'm thinking that I don't want to be fed by a woman, we ask you, what does it mean for you to be supported by a woman? So it's a meaning finger. And then when we move you from the meaning, we find a relationship. This finger here, that's where we put our ring. It's a relationship finger. It says, what kind of what relationship do you have with that meaning? Who introduced you to that kind of thinking? And then this finger here, the small finger, is the small actions you can take to change that kind of behavior. So we use this technique to identify the emotions of the client, the kind of worldview the client has, and what kind of actions they will do. Why do we do that? You see, in this finger, through the meaning and the relationship, that's where we've discovered the worldview. What kind of worldview the client holds, right? What kind of worldview the client holds. Let me just share my story a bit. One time, I wanted to clean shave, move my mustache, move everything using a razor, right? So when I'm standing in front of a mirror, I shave everything else, but I was struggling to remove my mustache. And I could not do it. And I was sitting and asking myself, why can't I remove this? Because I was feeling all sorts of emotions just to remove my mustache. Then I went through the process of a finger. What kind of emotions are you feeling right now? I'm feeling that when I remove, I'm going to look young, and I don't want to look young, and because people will think I'm young and they won't listen to me. And the kind of thoughts, I asked the thoughts, what kind of thoughts do I have? I said, when I'm young, people don't listen to me. People don't take you seriously. And then I went to the meaning. What's the meaning of that? Why, when people don't take you serious, what's going on? I don't have the kind of influence. I won't be able to impact them, and I won't be able to have that kind of influence with them. And then say, the relationship, where do you get that from? And the relationship part is the difficult one because people struggle to go to it. And then when I go back, I remember when I was young, I had a very tiny body. I couldn't, in places where we want to go to the nightclub, my friends, they will let my friends in. They will ask an ID from me. I must identify myself because of my body. I'm tiny. And then what helped me was that when I started growing the mustache, people realized that this one is growing, is old. So mustache gave me the escape. So I kept them because they gave me that kind of authority. But now I'm standing in front of a mirror. I'm supposed to remove it. I can't do it because I'm held up by a worldview and a thinking that is stopping me. And then I went to this small finger. What kind of an action, a small action that I can do to change the way I feel? And the action was just to remove them. And I removed them, and I looked differently, and nothing happened. I was still me. And I started enjoying life again. And that was a fascinating thing. So that's how these things happen. Now, what we normally do, we move from the emotion and go straight to the action. And we ignore this middle part. Every time, if you can look at conflict resolution, especially men, your wife will come in, hey, I've got a headache. And then you say, no, take a pill. You go straight to the pinky, and you don't want to follow the process. The wife wants to follow the process. When did it start? How does it feel? And go through the process and then bring a solution. These are the challenges. Now, when we discovered this, I discovered that when it comes to the meaning and the relationship, the worldview, that's where the worldview come in. That's where the worldview come in. And then now when you start asking questions, you discover that this client that you are sitting with now is actually sitting on this particular worldview. Now, as I said, I started my talk with the solution. Now I'm going back now to the philosophy. There are three dominant worldviews. Three dominant worldviews culturally. And one is guilt and innocent culture. I will explain this. Two, it's shame and honor culture. Three is fear and power culture. These worldviews, they interchange, they sit. As I'm sitting here, I have all three of them within me. But there's one that is dominant, that has been drilled in me through my culture, that I interpret life with and I engage with, especially emotionally, because these things, they sit in our emotions. So these three worldviews, like for instance, here in our complex, the guilt and the guilt and innocence culture is dominant among the Westerners, people from Europe, the West. It's dominant there. And I observed it one time here at the lift. We have one communal lift here, and this fellow neighbor of ours. We are sharing the same lift. He comes from the Western world. He smokes in the lift. And then I ask him, why do you smoke in the lift? This is a communal lift. It's a small lift. We come with children. Some of us, we don't smoke. I think it makes sense for you not to smoke in the lift. And when he responded by saying, but there is no sign that says no smoking in the lift. And I was like, okay. Now I understand. He comes from guilt and innocent culture. Because he's keeping the law, there is no law that he's breaking. All other things, they don't matter. The relational part does not matter, any other thing, because I did not break the law. And I understood where he comes from, but it was a marvel to watch. And we find the very same story in the Bible, because the Bible it has these cultures and it deals with them. And it's this rich young ruler in Mark chapter 10, he comes and says, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He's looking for something to do. And even Jesus Christ takes him to the law. He says, what does the law say? Because he understands that this is a guilty and innocent person. He says, what does the law do? Honor your mother, honor your father, and go and do likewise. He says, Master, I kept these since I was the youth, man. And then Jesus Christ goes ahead and tells him, the one thing you let go is sell everything and give to the poor and come and follow me. So that's where we see the beauty of the gospel, because the gospel takes you to the heart. It supersedes these cultures and goes straight to the heart. That's the beauty of the gospel. And then we have the shame and honor culture. The shame and honor culture, that's where the family, the community is important. You must conform to the unwritten laws of the community. Once you have kept that and you are right and you are working and you are feeding your family, or you are not infringing on your neighbors' properties, you don't steal, I was influenced by the shame and honor culture. I'm in my third marriage now. In my first marriage, I was young. The reason why I got married in there is because I wanted my father to honor me. I wanted my father to say, you are a man, you have made it, and getting married in our culture is a big thing. See, shame and honor. Because at that time I was age 22, I remember, and my friends were getting jobs, getting employed this side. I was the only one who's not working, and I needed something to be affirmed by my father and my family. And getting married was the next best thing that I would do. And I got married young, underdeveloped, and I made a mess of that marriage because I was underdeveloped. And I thought money will solve all my problems. When my wife wanted to be a wife, wanted a husband from me, I could not offer that because I'm underdeveloped. But the fear, the shame and honor culture has put a certain burden on me. And we see this shame and honor culture even in the scriptures, the story of the prodigal son. When he shames his family, he goes and lives outside and he comes back so shameful because he has lost everything. But the father reinstates him to cover his shame, right? And that's the beauty of the gospel, by the way. And then we have the fear and power culture. Fear and power culture is dominant in Africa, and it deals with the spirit world is something to be feared. It controls everything. When things are bad, we have to appease certain deities or spirits or their ancestors so that they make things favorably to us. And when a client reasons from that space, especially when you are doing biblical counseling, there are certain verses that you need to avoid using in the initial stages of your counseling, because your client, you have not yet located your client where they are in terms of the worldview. For instance, if the client is shame and honor culture, you can't be using the verses in the initial stages of your counseling. The verses like, you can't be my disciples if you don't hate your mother, you don't hate your father, you don't hate even your life, because the client will be lost. When you use, because the shame and honor says you must honor the family, honor the mother, honor the father. Therefore, you can't be using those verses. You have to explain them, give context, give details for you to honor. That is why in the first stages of your counseling, you avoid such, if you have discovered, or you haven't even discovered what worldview your client is coming from, right? And then the fear and power culture. It resonates very well with the power of resurrection, Jesus Christ being above all authorities and power. When you deal with your clients from the biblical perspective, when a person who's from the fear and power culture, you deal with them by showing how powerful Jesus Christ above the spiritual forces. And it's a complicated thing. However, it adds value in our counseling to understand that people, they don't come clean, they come with baggage, they come with certain processes in their minds, the way they do things. And once you understand this, I believe you will be able to counsel them better. I will stop here for now so that we engage with questions and answers. Remember, we have got these three dominant worldviews. One, fear and power culture. We have the shame and honor. We have the guilt and innocence. And then I believe that as we engage with questions and answers, we'll start unpacking all these things as they come together. I'll stop here for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nhlanhla. We have a question on the chat. Nhlanhla, I don't know if you're able to see that, but I can read it. How do we, in non-counseling situations, so basically just taking this worldview topic further, how do we use this information to better understand and connect with fellow South Africans? Okay, so does this worldview help in general or just with counseling?
Yeah, no, it worked with general. I mean, really, when I was struggling to shave my beard, it was a personal experience. I was not in the counseling room. It was me who was dealing with myself. Remember, this technique, this worldview, this technique of identifying worldview, you must first use it to yourself. Remember, in a relationship, you are bringing yourself to contribute into the relationship. As much as you appreciate the other person, if you 60% of the relational issues, if you can manage yourself so that you give off yourself in the way that relationship allows, you better handle things there. So I believe that this is a good tool that you use for yourself first before you use it to the other person. It's in the counseling space where you begin to use it for the other person, to assist them to find out where they are. Because normally, you see, worldview is something that is very interesting, that we don't think about it. We just act it out. It's only when stuff is put in front of us where we begin to see, oh, this is what I am thinking. But we just leave it out without thinking. So I would encourage that you use it for yourself first. Before, check yourself. Just take a heavy emotion that you have right now, and check yourself. Go through the technique, and you'll find out things about yourself that you never thought you never knew they were there.
So my question is, in parenting, I know you can't generalize, But which worldview do you think many parents fall into?
Yeah. Right. That's a difficult one because we can't really classify parents in a particular worldview, but it's human beings. Everyone parent from their worldview. I parent from my worldview. I see myself a lot. I use shame to straighten up my children. Go dress. What will people say? I parent from my worldview. And I believe everyone parents from their worldview. It's not a parent-child kind of a separation, but it's a cultural thing. So we always parent from our worldviews.
So I think, I'm just sort of going, Nhlanhla, depending on whether I go, don't do that, it's wrong, or whether I go, don't do that, don't embarrass me, or
Exactly.
Don't do that, I'm going to smack you. In essence, okay, I'm stereotyping terribly, but I mean, there's the three streams right there.
Good morning to everyone, and good morning, Nhlanhla. Thanks for the really wonderful talk. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, I do.
Cool, thanks. So I was thinking, I'm going to be very naughty here, Nhlanhla, so you are free to avoid the question as best you can or answer it.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm setting you up. So if I think about the worldviews as you've explained them, I was thinking how the guilt and innocence for me resonates with the DA in the political space.
Yeah.
And then the fear and power with the EFF. I'm still trying to decide where the ANC falls in terms of their perspective, and because they also have a worldview out of which they institute policy, out of which they sort of want to govern, and their governance proposition is in fact a resonance to, or an allusion to, a worldview. And so I think it's quite interesting how this idea of worldviews actually can be catapulted into all sorts of things. So if I've done enough to attract a comment from you on that, I'll be glad. But the second thing I want to say very quickly is Deuteronomy. I'm trying to remember the scripture, but there are enough Christians here to remind me of the scripture. But anyway, it's in Deuteronomy where it talks about the Lord saying, let these things be on your lamp posts, on your doorposts, on this or that. I think it's about the law, and having the law be so pervasive in your society that it's on your architecture, it's in your thinking, and I think that's important for us as Christians to adopt a worldview that's biblical, that pervades and is pervasive across even political ideologies and so on. It's something that the Lord says, take this law and have it pasted on everything about you. So yeah, I think, that's the biblical idea. Then, yeah, anyway, go for it.
Yeah. Well, I would respond this way. I'll try to duck and dive, as you have given me the power to do so. However, I feel that it was more of a comment than a question, and it's a good observation that you have made, that these worldviews, they play themselves out even in the way we do things. And true, I've seen this, I've observed it in our community. When you look at our community, the people who understand the guilt and innocent worldview respond to our political setup differently than people who don't. This is what I mean. Most of the people who understand the guilt and innocent worldview, you won't find them toying, burning things and tires. They write a petition, go to court, and apply for that particular law that is being violated by the political figure or whatever, to get their rights in. But people who don't understand that, who think the power lies elsewhere. They want to shame people by showing them that they are not doing their work, and they want to fight others. They burn incense and do these things because they come from a different worldview. But what they don't understand, that we're living in a constitution country where we don't need to toy. We just go to court and deal with it. So we are influenced by the guilt and innocent culture in our makeup, in our political makeup. Yet people on the ground, they still respond based on their worldview, and they find themselves doing, and never get what they want. Yet the Constitution has given them the power and the right to do certain things. So it's a good observation that you made then, Luma, and I appreciate it. And I saw another question here. I saw another question on the chat, just that it has moved up, but I got the sense of it to say, how does the gospel balance these cultures?
Well, the question is, how does it both affirm and challenge each of the cultures or worldviews?
Yes. And I was hoping that question would come, because that's where I wanted to go. I love the gospel because it brings solution. It's a unifier. You know, when Jesus Christ, when it says he brings the unity, he brings the unity of things. The gospel, there are three ways that we can approach life, really. There would be a moralistic way of approaching life, where you are looking for a particular sin to correct, which will fall more on the guilt and innocent culture. You want to avoid a certain sin and keep certain laws so that things will be fine for you. You are operating from a particular culture. Yet the gospel does not operate there. And there's the second way you can deal with life. You can be a relativist. You can say truth is what matters to me, or what I prefer, or my experience. And yet, this is where these cultures fall in. When we want to engage with life based on our relative cultural makeup, we are not going to win. But the gospel is very interesting. The gospel goes to the heart. The gospel asks a deep question. It's much deeper than it. The gospel asks, what God have you kept in your heart that is competing with the true God? That's the question of the gospel. The gospel is saying, what is that thing that when you think you have lost, your life does not matter anymore? You don't see any reason to live. If that thing, if any of the three cultures, you hold them so dear that they cause you to stumble, that it means the gospel is still finding its way into your heart. You are not. That's where the gospel liberates us, because it goes to the heart to say, I see now. I engage in so many debates about the African identity. The people the Pan-Africanists that I debate with all the time, their argument is that post-colonial, do we still need this Christianity to embrace? But when you look at their argument closely, they exalt being an African above God, above the gospel. And this is where I argue with them all the time to say, no, you see, when you do that, you are falling into the very trap that got us where we are. If you're going to exalt being an African above what the gospel claims, you're going to have a problem. Rather, understand what the gospel claims. The gospel claims that our hearts are not good. Our hearts do not incline towards God. They are always hostile towards God. And once we know how to submit them to God, then we engage with being African. We can engage with this fear and honor, shame, culture, guilt and innocence very well. And we see it, the picture, the story that I used of the rich young ruler is a perfect one. He comes, this person, with a guilt and innocence culture. Say, what must I do to inherit eternal life? The gospel himself, which is Christ, he engages with him in such a way that he understands. He says, what does the law say? To bring him to the end of the law, to say, you can't keep it, you see, because you have got one thing that is lacking. Go sell everything, give to the poor. I wish he said, go and invest. No, he didn't say that. He says, give to the poor and follow me. You see, that's where the gospel becomes, come follow me. He goes to the woman at the well, for instance. The woman at the well is filled with shame and honor, is being orchestrated out of the community. Shame is over her. Jesus Christ goes straight to the heart. He says, go call your husband. I don't have one. Shows them I accept you, even though you have five. But there's this water that I will make you drink. You never come here and thirst. You know, he gives you what? Himself. So that's the beauty of the gospel, because it liberates us from these systems that we are using, yet we use them in a different way. We use them from a different perspective. So I hope I've made, I gave justice to the question.
That's a beautiful answer, Nhlanhla. Thank you. Something that just sort of scrolled past, but I'm going to step right into it. And again, you're allowed to duck and dive. So the way we address each other, this is tangential, but anyway. So, I mean, I'm calling you, hi, good morning. I'm calling you Nhlanhla. I'm not calling you Mfundisi Zwane. Is the way we address each other also very much linked to these cultural streams, or is that something different?
No, it is connected. You know, one of the struggles that I have personally is that as I work at JPC, I realize that I'm working in an environment that is dominated by a particular culture, right? And every time I have to call you, Torsten, by name, it's a spiritual warfare. I have to push myself to that space. And obviously, I've got grace from you to you giving me the right to do that. But generally, it's not. I had a nanny, for instance, who was older than me. I could not give her instructions because she was older than me. I had to pray hard to ask her to iron something for me, because in my head, I'm asking an elder to iron my shirt. It's a difficult thing to do, but I had to learn it and do it in a particular way. Yes, it's really is connected.
And just for interest, are you associating that with honor, shame, or with power, fear?
Yeah, I started with shame and honor. It's shame and honor.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's another one on the chat. Greatest concern on the worldview exposition is a tendency to define life on the basis of problem identification rather than absolute focus on positive vision. So in other words, this whole worldview thing, this whole worldview focus, does it make us focus on the problem, or is rather than a vision forward? Is that a valid?
Yeah, I would think it's a vision forward, because practically, if I did not understand your worldview, Torsten, I was going to still insist on calling you with a prefix. I was going to call you Mr. Torsten or Ndate Torsten or whatever. I was going to insist on that. But because I have the understanding of the worldviews, it helps me to understand when you are fine with it. And it's also going to help you when I probably insist that you call me, which now I don't mind because I've evolved. But if I was still held up, I was going to ask you to call me Mfundisi, because it has its own benefits. But I think it's a good tool for us to move forward, because we understand each other, and it's easy to give each other grace.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Since encountering the three colors of culture, I think the framework, I would say I've found it to be an extremely powerful way of lens through which to make sense of where different cultures clash. So I just generally say that I really appreciate the insight that it brings. I do wonder, how are these three categories arrived at? So how are these mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive? So if I were to suggest, isn't there a profit loss culture as well? How is this where the analysis stopped?
Yeah, as I said in my talk, that these are three dominant, but we are not limited to these three. But you find that the root even of the profit loss, it comes somewhere. When you trace its root, it will lend you to either one of them. Why do you want the profit? Why do you want to lose it? You'll feel ashamed and you feel no honor when you don't have profit and what. Eventually, they will land on one of the three. So that is why I said these are three dominant ones. These are the foundations. But out of the three spills out other worldviews that people create as we go. Like now in the postmodern time, where relativism is the order of the day. Where do you put that? where do you deal with it? And this is a sad story about the postmodern thing. It's a topic for another day, but we deal with this all the time in our counseling room. We find young people being frustrated by this postmodern thinking because the absolute has hit them in the face and they don't know how to respond to it. So in short, these are foundations, but you find this from these, there's others that just come out.
You fired on so many cylinders today: the practical help with the hand, the meaning, the relationships. And I loved your comment too about how the gospel unifies us. And listening to Q&A here in South Africa, that's what I love about the rich tapestry. And your comment about colonization, decolonization of the gospel, we have that ongoing conversation in one of our small groups. And the fascinating thing is, what do we do with topics and how do we respond to them based upon our predominant cultural worldview? Let me give an example. We would study in the Gospel of Luke, looking at the transfiguration, when one of our young activists raised her hand and said, now, wait a minute, Jesus is talking to his ancestors. Now, if you read certain commentaries that are based on the Western worldview, right, or Eurocentric, you would never get a comment about ancestors linked to the transfiguration.
Yeah.
And again, what does one do based upon one's worldview without realizing immediately? Does one cut the conversation, say, no, if we are Christ followers, we do not talk about ancestors?
Yeah.
Well, let's unpack that and let's listen to how we perceive it as Christ followers to honor and respect our ancestors without that becoming an issue of idolatry or having another God that comes before God.
Yeah.
And then recently, again, we had a new person join that small group, and the topic of ancestors came up, and immediately that person bristled and said, there's no place for ancestors in the Bible or as Christians. So I throw that out to you. I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts. Thanks.
Yeah. It's very interesting. The issue of ancestors will always come out because it's a strong fear power worldview thing, right? From this is where I was raised, and it took years for me to come out of that concept, but through exposing myself to the gospel, it's a very strong one. And it's interesting that you use the transfiguration, that we say, somebody will say, look, he's talking to your ancestors. So the Bible is affirming the issue of ancestors, but it also, afterwards, what happened? This is my son. Listen to him. Even Peter wanted to go back and say, no, let's pitch the tent here. Let's pitch a tent here. And Moses will be here, Elijah will be here, Lord will be here, all will be good. But the voice said, this is my son, listen to him. So the voice did not say, these are demons, these are ancestors, don't go to them. It affirmed that they were there. But now, this is my son, listen to him. So it brings a very interesting a view on that one. You wanted to say something, right?
Yabonga kakhulu mfundisi.
Ah, you see, thank you very much. You see, you're speaking my language, I feel good. Yeah. Yeah, I think, I think we're there. You know what I like is that the gospel truly is the unifier. The gospel truly is the unifier. Let me share a little bit of my story tossed in here for a minute. That I used to embrace Black theology and the liberation theology because it made sense to me at the time. We needed freedom, and we fought using the Bible, trying to argue from the Bible. Everyone who was oppressed, we identified ourselves with the oppressed, and we said God is for us because we are oppressed. And as I go through this narrative, the more I understand the gospel, it's very hard for me to embrace that theology. Because I realized that I was telling one of the Pan-Africanists, I said to him, look, if you want to raise people and you want for us to emancipate as Black people, I'm afraid from studying scripture that I don't think the Bible will support you there. But if you go for justice, when you go for justice, the Bible will support you. Because justice is for human beings. It's human beings who, everybody benefits in justice. And that's where the scriptures stand, right? And it goes without saying, the previously disadvantaged people, when you go for justice, you will address their challenges, but at least your heart will be kept because you won't exalt Blackness and Africanness above whiteness because you're going to end us here in the same problem that we are in. So let's go for justice. And the gospel is about that. It brings the two one. It's a unifier. It brings us back to justice. It's time for us as human beings to say, what have we done to ourselves? When did we forget that we are human beings and we are caught up in color? When did we do that? And the gospel does that for us. So that is why I like the gospel. The gospel is a unifier.
A comment and a question from Vera on the chat. We need to prayerfully realize that our worldview may affect our counseling and be self-aware so that we don't subconsciously try and make counselees follow our own worldview.
Yeah.
That's the other side of the coin, isn't it? It's not just the worldview of the other, but my own, and being aware of that and not unduly pulling someone in the wrong direction. And then keeping that in mind, in counseling, do we do the same thing that Jesus does? Start with the worldview people are living in and humbly follow that thinking to the conclusion where we see it falls short, and then demonstrate the hope the gospel offers. Well, that's a bit of a leading question, but how do you answer?
I agree. I think I think that's the best strategy to go with them. When in counseling, probably Vera will know this. In counseling, when you go with the client, they feel comfortable, they open up, and they also appreciate the turn that you're taking with them because you have walked with them. You did not shut them up and try to introduce your worldview to them. And that counseling doesn't win, you know. But Jesus Christ, it's a technique, especially just watch go and look at the woman at the well, how Jesus Christ deals with that woman. It's such a brilliant thing to watch. He goes with her, and then at the end offers the gospel. I think I agree with Vera there.
So just in closing, it's a quote by a very wise person by the name of Nhlanhla Zwane, who says, the gospel is where the law and culture ends and begins with the admonition, follow me. So yeah, I thought that's just echoing back to you and capturing for the rest of us what you said. Thank you so much for your engagement with us this morning.
You know, what helped me, because I was one of the community at some point, and one of the things that made me move away from or avoid Christianity was that very fact that I was confused as to, now my ancestors are going to become demons. What happens now to my ancestors? Thank God for one guy called Pastor Dick Koza. I would invite him one day in these talks just to come and listen. He deals with Christianity and culture. He's written 2 books already now on the topic. He assisted me to separate Jesus from everything. If we know how to do that, show Jesus. Like, for instance, the argument that people make, especially the Pan-Africanists, they will say Christianity colonized us, and they say Jesus colonized no one. It's a way that we can come in. But the challenge also is this: we must not start there. We must not start there in showing them that the Bible is authority. We must start elsewhere. We must start where we show them their need for connecting with the spiritual forces. Because the Bible affirms that God is spirit. They want to connect with the higher power, right? Must just affirm their need first, to say this need is legitimate, is a legitimate need. And the Bible does address it. Then you go to the verses like Colossians chapter 1, from 15 to 20, you show the supremacy of Christ. You see how Christ is supreme. Whenever I rested in the supremacy of Christ, it was easy for me. And also, do not demonize the ancestors. Understand that the ancestors are people who lived before us. And this, if I am going to read the book of Aristotle, he's an ancestor. So we have to present it in that way, to say, no, the issue is the ancestral worship. That's where the challenge comes. But you learn from your ancestor. You see their wrongs, you see their rights, you see where they erred, you see where they did right. You learn from that, and then you move towards what the Bible says. Because the challenge that we make as if anything that the ancestors did was useless, and then that's where we get stuck. That's where we get stuck. Even myself, I will say no, but there are many lessons I've learned from my grandfather that are affirmed by the Bible, and that's wisdom, and they produce results. So what do you say? So it's how we present it, I think, that is important.